What if the language you speak doesn't come from your country, or even your continent? What if its nearest relatives aren't spoken in Europe at all, but in the frozen forests of western Siberia? That's not fiction, that's Hungarian. Because while Hungary sits firmly in Central Europe, its language, Magyar, is a linguistic orphan, completely unrelated to the Indo-European tongues that surround it. And here's the twist that stunned scientists and linguists alike. Hungarians' closest living relatives are Khanty and Muntzi, two dying languages still clinging to life. 3,000 kilometers away, near the Ob River in the Siberian taiga. This is not just strange, it's unprecedented. For over a century, the dominant theory placed the Proto-Uralic homeland near the Ural Mountains, a logical halfway point between East and West. But in 2025, that theory was shattered. A landmark study published in Nature analysed the genomes of 180 ancient individuals from northern Eurasia. Among them was a unique genetic cluster, Yakutia LNBA, found only in one place, the Lena River Basin, Yakutia, northeastern Siberia, 4,500 years ago. This was no ordinary population. These were mobile metal trading tribes linked to the Seima Turbino phenomenon, a transcontinental Bronze Age network that stretched from Lake Baikal to the Volga. Their tools moved fast, but their language, Uralic, moved faster. And the DNA confirms it. This Yakutia LNBA signature appears consistently in every Uralic-speaking population, ancient or modern, from the Finns in the west to the Mansi in the east, and yes, in the conquering Magyars of the 9th century. So here lies the contradiction at the heart of Hungarian identity. Your language was born in the snowfields of Yakutia, but your home is in the Carpathian Basin. You speak the voice of a vanished forest, in the middle of Europe. And yet, no single migration explains how that voice travelled thousands of kilometres west. No simple map shows how it took root and survived through wars, empires and centuries of assimilation. To understand how that language made it out of Siberia alive, we have to follow the trail of ancient DNA into one of the most mysterious Bronze Age migrations ever recorded. And that trail leads us to a river so cold it freezes solid for 8 months of the year. The Lena River, winding through Yakutia in the icy heart of northeastern Siberia, the Lena is no ordinary landmark. It's a fossil bed, a frozen time capsule, holding the genetic memory of a people we once thought were lost. In 2025, a groundbreaking genetic study published in Nature cracked open that time capsule. Scientists analysed 180 ancient genomes dating from the Mesolithic to the Bronze Age across northern Eurasia. And in that data, they found a ghost, a genetic signature that had survived 4,500 years, buried in silence, then suddenly reappeared in places no one expected. They named it Yakutia LNBA. This wasn't just a new ancestral marker, it was the defining signature of early Uralic-speaking peoples, the same marker seen in the Khanty, the Mansi, the Finns, and crucially, the Magyars. But how did this Siberian fingerprint travel thousands of kilometers west? The answer might lie in one of the fastest and most mysterious technological spreads in ancient history, the Seima Turbino phenomenon around 2000 BCE. Imagine it, a sudden explosion of advanced bronze tools, weapons and horse gear leaping from the Altai-Sayan mountains across the entire steppe, moving not over centuries but decades. And with those tools came people, nomadic traders, elite warrior smiths and small mobile clans, all part of a vast metallurgical superhighway stretching from Lake Baikal to the Volga. Their presence is stamped into the archaeological record. Identical bronze axes and spearheads buried 4,000 kilometres apart. But the Seima Turbino weren't just trading metal, they were mixing blood. Genetic studies show these early travellers carried a hybrid ancestry, blending Magyars steppe tribes, Angnasan Arctic foragers, and Proto-Uralic Yakutians. They didn't settle, they moved, and as they moved they seeded languages, in riverside camps, in burial mounds, in forgotten forest clearings. And one of those seeds would one day become Hungarian. But these wanderers weren't just trading tools, they were carrying a legacy, one that would reshape the power structure of medieval Europe. But here's what no one expected. The founders of Hungary weren't one people. They were 10, and many of them didn't even speak Hungarian. When the Magyars stormed into the Carpathian Basin around 895 AD, they didn't arrive as a nation. They were a confederation, a stitched-together war machine, a volatile mix of tribes, clans and renegade factions. This wasn't theory. This was revealed by ancient DNA, pulled from the bones of 113 elite conquest-era skeletons buried in Hungary's oldest Magyar cemeteries. And what that DNA said cracked the myth wide open. Inside those bones were 7 different Y chromosome haplogroups from opposite ends of Eurasia. N1A, the Siberian marker of Ugric-speaking ancestors. R1A-Z93, the lineage of Scythians and Sarmatians. C2, Mongolic, even Xiongnu. Q1A2, tied to ancient Huns and Turkic nomads. R1BI2A, E1B1B, Western and Southern European threads. It was like opening a single grave and finding the ghosts of 5 different civilizations. These tribes didn't share a single language, they didn't share a single religion. But they shared one thing that bound them tighter than blood: survival. Their cemeteries were mosaics, half steppe, half European, horse burials and warrior belts laid beside Slavic pendants and Byzantine crosses. Each grave whispered a different story, but together they shouted one message. This wasn't a Magyar invasion. It was a multinational uprising. They didn't just conquer a region, they invented a country, but in the land they claimed something was waiting. Not a people, but an empire, buried but not broken, and it was about to rise from its ruins, because before the Magyars carved their place into Europe, the land already belonged to someone else, not just a tribe, an empire, the Avars. For over 2 centuries, from 568 to 800 CE, the Avar Khaganate ruled the Carpathian Basin, and they ruled it with power. War horses thundered across Pannonian plains, Turkic titles echoed in stone halls, and deep beneath the ground, the gold of Byzantium slept in their tombs. Historians once believed the Magyars were their sons, theorized they were a return, a resurgence of Avar bloodlines under a new banner. This idea became legend, the dual conquest theory, championed by Hungarian scholar Gyula Laszlo. But now, the bones say otherwise. 2 of the most important Avar burial sites, Lobersdorf and Mödling, revealed a haunting contradiction. Archaeologically, they looked the same. Same weaponry, same ornaments, same elite graves. But genetically, they were strangers. Lobersdorf elites carried DNA rooted in Northeast Asia, almost certainly from Rouran or early Mongolic tribes, echoing back to the heart of Central Asia. Meanwhile, Mödling burials told a different story. Individuals with heavy European admixture, likely local populations absorbed into Avar society. It was an empire by domination, not by blood. And when the Magyars entered the scene in 895 AD, there was no bridge between them. No genetic match, no shared identity, no buried thread linking Avar to Magyar. The Avars had fallen, crushed by Charlemagne's Franks in 796, and whatever flame they once carried had turned to ash beneath Magyar hooves. So if the Magyars didn't inherit the Avar throne, didn't rise from its bones, then who were they becoming as they stepped into power? Because the next truth doesn't lie in their enemies, it lives in the people they conquered. Imagine just 150,000 outsiders rewriting the identity of an entire region forever. In 895 AD, under the war banners of Grand Prince Arpad, the Magyar tribes crossed the Carpathian Mountains and entered a world not empty, but crowded. They rode in with fire and freedom, but they weren't millions. Estimates say they numbered only between 50,000 to 150,000. Waiting for them in the Carpathian Basin? Between 500,000 and 2 million locals, Slavs, Avars, remnants of Romanized Pannonians, far outnumbered, deeply rooted. So how did the newcomers take control? Not with numbers, but with dominance. They brought cavalry warfare the locals had never seen. They buried their dead with horses, war beasts positioned beside tribal lords in graves still being uncovered today. They spoke in Uralic tongues. They ruled with nomadic codes, and soon their customs, their titles, their gods became the identity of the land. Archaeologists find it in the earth, conquest period cemeteries filled with hybrid burial styles. Magyar tribal regalia, alongside Slavic-style jewellery, Avar belt buckles and Christian cross pendants, all blending under one roof of soil. But here's the most haunting part. Their genes almost disappeared. Genetic studies show that the early Magyar elite left shockingly little biological legacy in the modern Hungarian population. Their blood diluted, their bodies absorbed, but their language, their symbols, their structure survived. It wasn't the genes that conquered, it was the culture. They didn't erase the people they found. They replaced the story those people told about themselves. But something else survived, buried deeper than banners or blood. In the bones of today's Hungarians, there's a faint echo, a whisper, of a world older than conquest. Because even if you look European, even if your family's lived in Hungary for centuries, your DNA might still whisper in Siberian. That whisper is real, and science just found it. In 2022, a major genome-wide study pulled DNA from 10th century Magyar skeletons and compared it to thousands of modern Hungarians. At first glance, the transformation was complete. Modern Hungarians look, genetically, just like their Central European neighbours, but hidden deep in the strands, there was a shadow, a remnant, a ghost, a trace of ancient Siberian ancestry linked to the Nganasan people, Arctic foragers from the Yenisei River basin. This wasn't fantasy. It showed up in the numbers. The Y-DNA haplogroup N1-CTAT, once dominant in the Uralic-speaking warriors who arrived around 895 AD, made up 37% of early Magyar elite males. Today, just 2 to 6% of Hungarian men carry it. The bloodline faded, diluted by centuries of mixing, migration, empire and survival. But it never disappeared. Which means this: you could walk through Budapest today, carrying the genetic imprint of a people who once hunted reindeer in the Siberian snow, and you'd never know. Here's the twist. Modern Finns, who speak a related Uralic language, carry more N1-CTAT than Hungarians do. But they share zero Magyar ancestry. Hungarians kept the words, Finns kept the genes. It's the ultimate paradox of identity. language without blood, blood without language. But the real shock is what happens when we shift the lens. Because not all Magyars came with swords. Some arrived carrying stories and scars. Because buried in the next graves are women and children. Magyars who weren't conquering. They were fleeing, and some weren't Magyars at all. Of the 10 tribes who rode into the Carpathian Basin under Grand Prince Arpad, 3 didn't speak Hungarian, didn't worship the same gods, and didn't come from the same homeland. They were rebels, exiles, outlaws of a broken empire. Around 830 AD, a civil war erupted inside the mighty Khazar Khaganate, a Turkic superpower that once dominated the steppes from the Volga to the Caucasus. A group of tribes, the Kabar, rose against their Khazar rulers and lost. Exiled and hunted, these warrior clans fled north and found asylum among the Magyars. But they didn't just join, they changed the game. When the Magyars crossed the Carpathians in 895, the Kabar rebels rode beside them, fully armed, battle-tested, bringing a warrior culture sharpened by centuries of steppe warfare. Their fingerprints are still visible today. Basic Magyar words like sereg, army, vezér, leader, and tabor, camp, aren't Uralic, they're Turkic. In fact, a Turkic vocabulary makes up a deep stratum of Hungarian, embedded not as foreign loanwords, but as the language of command, and the DNA confirms it. Conquest-era remains show genetic links to Volga Tatars, Bashkirs, and other Turkic groups from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Their Y chromosome markers mirror those still found in regions that once formed the Khazar frontier. And culturally, it was fusion. Magyar graves from this period begin to show steppe-style sabres, ornamented belt buckles, curved knives, and Turkic dress motifs, unlike earlier Uralic patterns. The Magyars absorbed it all: the clothing, the weapons, the structure of elite warrior brotherhoods. But one thing still didn't match: the bones. Because in one set of elite graves, something was off. The shape, the scars, the legacy inside the marrow. The most shocking discovery wasn't in their clothes, it was in their skeletons, and what they revealed about the true face of power. Could it be that the Magyars, conquering the Carpathian Basin, carried the blood of Attila the Hun? That wasn't a throwaway theory. It's rooted in unstudied graves, ancient DNA, and tribal memory. When 21st century geneticists analysed the warrior bones from 10th century Magyar sites, they found something staggering. The Y chromosome haplogroups dominating among these early elite fighters, R1A-Z94, Q1A2, even C-M217, aren't European. They connect the Magyars directly to Hun, Xiongnu, and other steppe elites, those legendary horse warrior cultures of the Iron Age and pre-medieval Eurasia. But men weren't the only carriers. Their women came from far too. Their mitochondrial DNA, the A, B, C, and D haplogroups, whisper of inner Asian origins. These maternal lineages tie back to regions like North China, the Mongolian steppe, and the vast reaches of Central Asia. Women just as essential to the tribe and just as far-flung. Imagine frozen steppes, relentless cavalry charges, and nomadic drums, then stir in a fierce conversation between cultures. The Magyars brought stirrups long before Western knights, their grip on horseback warfare unmatched, their burial rites sprinkled with steppe shamanism, animal bones, ritual stones, and enigmatic amulets. If identity is blood, then the Magyars wore inner Asia on their sleeves, or rather, in their marrow. But if identity is the stories we choose to pass down, then there's a deeper conflict. Because centuries later, modern Hungarians are nothing like those horse warriors in look, language or belief. So which is more powerful, your blood or your story? But one thing remains unbroken, your language. Somehow it survived without their swords, without their genes. How? Because in one of the strangest turns in European history, the language survived, even though its people didn't. Modern Hungarians carry only a faint trace of the conqueror DNA that stormed the Carpathian Basin in 895 AD. But they still speak Magyar, a Uralic tongue born thousands of kilometres away from the icy rivers of Siberia. How? Not by numbers, not by heritage, but by domination. This is what scientists call the elite dominance model. A small, powerful ruling group, like the Norman French in England or Arab conquerors in North Africa, can impose their language without leaving much genetic trace. And the Magyars, they mastered it. Under the Arpad dynasty, Magyar became the language of command, law, land rights and nobility. To rise in the new order, you had to speak it, and over time, you forgot the tongue of your ancestors, but you remembered theirs. Today, nearly 4,000 core words in Hungarian come from its ancient Uralic root, untouched by Slavic or Turkic neighbours. And those aren't borrowed phrases, they're foundation words for water, fire, blood, hand, moon, the things you say before you can even walk. Which means this: the body's changed, the face is changed, the faith changed. But the voice, the soul of a forgotten people, somehow echoed through 1,100 years of war, empire, assimilation and silence. Even as genetic studies reveal just 2 to 6% of the original Y DNA remains in modern Hungary, the language marches on. But how did it survive that long? Through 5 invasions, 2 collapses, Ottoman warlords, Habsburg emperors, and the burning of identity. Because the final mystery isn't about DNA, it's about memory. And who fought to protect it when no one else remembered the words?